campaign on inflation and gas prices and crime, they've done nothing to even symbolically address those issues. Instead, they've turned Congress into the legislative branch of Fox News, holding these hearings about why their Twitter accounts were banned and promising to investigate why a TV provider dropped Newsmax. And yes, you can chalk a lot of this up to the personalities at issue, the kinds of people who excel in modern Republican politics, the fractiousness, the MAGA caucus calling the shots in a narrow majority. But that doesn't explain it all. I actually think there's something much deeper at play. I have a theory here, and an illustration of that theory in action is all on display right now in the reaction to the train derailment disaster in Ohio. So, as you've likely heard, as Mehdi covered on the program last night, train carrying chemicals, including a toxic flammable gas called vinyl chloride, derailed near the Ohio-Pennsylvania border earlier this month. That, in turn, started a fire, and then they had to do a sort of controlled release of some of those chemicals, which blanketed the town of East Palestine, Ohio, in noxious smoke. There are, as of today and continuing, really significant concerns about the accident leaving behind a lasting environmental disaster. And many residents of the town of East Palestine are complaining of health issues and, understandably, fearful about returning to their homes.
Some living in the area are still smelling strong chemical odors. Now they're demanding transparency about what toxins might be lurking in local creeks and in the atmosphere, how they could potentially impact the area in the future. The EPA says the village's water supply is safe. Residents are worried that homes with well water may be at risk. And residents say they want long-term testing with the results publicly posted.
When journalists of the New Republic interviewed people on the ground, including a woman whose family donned N95 masks and gloves before entering their contaminated home, only to find, quote, after leaving her eyes burned and itched, her throat was sore, she had a rash, her husband and both her sisters had migraines. Another woman who lives by the accident site, quote, has suffered from a sore throat while her 8-month-old baby has suffered respiratory issues. Now, after enormous public pressure, Norfolk Southern, which is the rail company that operated the train that derailed, announced a new round of financial assistance to benefit the impacted community today. But it's pretty clear that a lot more needs to be done for the people of East Palestine. And this is where we come to what I think is the sort of fundamental failure of the Republican Party right now. Because Republicans have had a lot to say about the incident. They've been talking about a lot. They've mostly been trying to score political points at the expense of the Biden administration. Marjorie Taylor Greene, current thought leader of the Republican Party, who voted against the bipartisan infrastructure bill last Congress, went on a somewhat bizarre Twitter rant where she seemed to blame pot-addled liberals for our crumbling institutions. Ohio Republican Senator J.D. Vance, fresh on the job, blamed the bipartisan infrastructure bill for not magically solving the problem of the train's derailment overnight.
We've had hundreds of train derailments after we spent over $1 trillion on infrastructure in this country. So the fact that this isn't getting obviously better is a major indictment of the people spending the money and what they're spending the money on.
Now, that bill passed in November 2021. That was the appropriation for the money. It hasn't been spent, right? And we have not been able to fix an entire nation's crumbling infrastructure in the intervening year, though it's not clear this was an infrastructure problem to begin with. Now, a number of Republicans have also come forward to blame Biden's high-profile transportation secretary, Pete Buttigieg, including Florida Congressman Byron Donalds.
I don't even know why we take Pete Buttigieg seriously at this point. This man, the only reason he's in his job is because of his intersectionality. Let's just be honest about the situation.
Ironic for Representative Byron Donalds to say that, who was brought up as a speaker, potentially brought up for the speaker role, you know. Come on, man. You're a black Republican talking about intersectionality? Like, really? You're talking about, like, you know. Come on, man. Jesus Christ.
He doesn't know what he's doing. He's actually been a terrible transportation secretary. I mean, look, when the supply chains were being blown up, the man wasn't even at work. Nobody missed him. Nobody even knew he was there.
He was on paternity leave when that happened for his child was born. Now, to be clear, Donalds is accusing Buttigieg of only getting his job because he's gay. It's a gross smear. But one right-wing podcaster took things a step further.
Buttigieg is out talking about how workers are too white. For the last couple of years, I have been warning about this crusade against white people, and people shrug their shoulders and say, oh, Charlie, Why does that matter? I could tell you why it matters. When there's a crisis now and the leaders hate working class whites, they're not going to scramble to save your life. They'll lie to you and tell you to go back home.
It's just so fucking indecent that these right-wing psychopaths end up getting exactly what they wanted, which is deregulation, and then they look to the rubble of the chaos that they've caused and point to it again and say, this is happening because people don't care about you because you're fucking white. It's like, bro, that distinction was created so that this deregulation and the profit margins could remain as solidly profitable as possible. Like the original distinction of like, oh man, black people, white people, great replacement. Like that is a distraction. It's a distraction caused by right-wing racial propagandists. It's created with a specific purpose to get white working class people to not recognize that they are white working class people. Okay? Hyper focus on the white. Think that there's like very big distinctions in the way that like capital owners treat you from black people. Okay? And then you won't realize that they're taking money out of your pocket, that they're fucking you over.
While you're poisoned.
Oh, lie to you until you go back home when you're poisoned. Sure, that's never happened to black people in this country before. Yeah, let me just check on the history. Nope, definitely never happened.
Yeah, that's the other side of this story. Is like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, the government doesn't give a fuck about white people. Of course they don't give a fuck about black people. Like, a government that does not care about white people absolutely doesn't give a shit about black people, okay? This is a reality that also every black person understands. This is why, like, Black Lives Matter will go and protest police brutality against white people all the fucking time. Okay? They don't even give a fuck about poor white people. The entire thing is designed to fuck over black people. Of course they don't give a fuck about black people.
Okay. I'm cherry picking particularly ludicrous examples, but this is what they do. I mean, there's a real thing that happened, right? A very real thing. Real people really impacted by a real disaster. Tangible thing. Whenever there's a problem or a crisis, folks on the right got someone or some group that's out to get you. And maybe it's the openly gay Secretary of Transportation or a fictional cabal of woke elites conspiring against white people. And I get it. Republicans think this is a very sound rhetorical and political strategy. And I get why they're worked up about this issue. East Palestine is a very white, rural, working class place. It's the kind of town Donald Trump and Fox News tell you has been forgotten by woke elites. And when they say it's been forgotten and left behind, they're not entirely wrong. There's a real nugget of truth there. It's also true that Pete Buttigieg is the Secretary of Transportation, that he isn't the guy in charge of regulating the railroads. And legitimate good faith criticisms of his job performance, rather than his identity, are obviously completely fair game. When you're the administration, when you're the presidency.
It's kind of wild to hear this from an MSNBC commentator, by the way. I mean, MSDNC.
This is the stuff you got to answer for. There's a major train derailment on your watch. Okay, so far so good. There's a real problem, right? Pete Buttigieg really is the transportation secretary. But here's where all of a sudden it ends. Republicans can complain all they want, but what do you want to do? What do you want to do? They can't really offer any real solutions because in the end, this is a classic story about corporate interest and regulation. Big corporations like the railroad companies, Norfolk Southern, and the chemical companies whose chemicals they transport have every monetary incentive under shareholder capitalism to keep regulation light, right? So their costs stay low. And then if something goes bad, they can externalize the costs of disasters like this, right? The government, in turn, has a responsibility to push regulation anyway to prevent the burden of disasters like this falling on regular folks like those in the town of East Palestine. For liberals like myself, this is all a pretty clear story. The solutions here are pretty clear. We should probably have better regulation and stronger worker power. Here's one example, right? For instance, there was an Obama-era train braking rule specifically for cars carrying flammable materials. They had to upgrade their braking. That was eliminated under Donald Trump, although he was eliminated with an assist from a small provision in a 2015 bill passed by Congress and, signed by Obama, that the train corporations had lobbied for, that had kind of challenged and watered down the regulation. Now, in this case, it wasn't the braking, we think. There was a fire on the train before it derailed. But again, that's the kind of prudential safety regulation you want to look at. Like, okay, maybe we need to upgrade safety regulatory standards on train cars like this. You can also make polluters pay for the cleanup costs of disasters caused by their products and services, like the Superfund site situation. Okay? Again, these are just two straightforward answers, policy answers, that will make people's lives tangibly better or at least address the problem. But here's the thing. Contemporary conservatives in the Republican Party can't offer those types of solutions. Can they say, you know what? We need to regulate the railroad companies. No. Are they going to say that? Let's stick it to the greedy companies, soak the rich. They can't do that.
Yeah, which is why they turned the conversation back on like, oh, they don't care about you because you're white. No, motherfucker, they don't care about you because you're poor. Okay? They want you to remain poor so they can continue to not care about you.
That's what libs want to do. Conservatives are not ideologically disposed to those types of ampers. More importantly, the entire superstructure of Republican politics, including their donors, won't let them do it. No matter how much lip service they pay to regular working folks on their various podcasts, the Republican Party is fundamentally, when the chips are down, when it's time for the rubber to hit the road, when it's time to govern, beholden to the rich and corporate interests. And there are conservatives watching this right now who will see this clip who will agree with me. I promise you. Here's example number one, Kevin McCarthy, the new Speaker of the House, top Republican in the country, essentially letting his buddy, Jeff Miller, who's like a top corporate lobbyist, basically help run the party. The guy was like running the war room behind his speaker vote. And again, this isn't a question.
Educate yourself on how the left Congress and Biden voted to keep union workers quiet about this very issue a few months ago. I love the gall of a random Twitch chatter coming in here and telling me to educate myself as though I haven't been shitting on the Democratic Party non-fucking stop on that particular issue. Specifically, for months before this train derailment happened. He said left Congress. Okay, carry on then. Like, the attitude from this random dickhead. Like, why don't you fucking Google it, dipshit? Why don't you just search on YouTube what my thoughts are about the railroad unions and my coverage on it? Probably an LSF chatter. A comment saying you did the opposite got giga upvoted. Wait, what? People. All right, let's get into some labor use. People just make shit up about me now. Is that what it is? They just, I mean, they always do, but like they just say the exact opposite of what I actually have been advocating for. Is that what it is? It's way easier to assume what you think and attack that, though. Oh, by the way, update on this issue. Full sellout from the White House for the majority of rail workers. I don't understand. I've done numerous videos on this. I don't even bother finding hate comments anymore because they just attract straw man. They just attack straw man arguments. That's crazy. Why do other people just like, instead of coming here or instead of like legitimately looking for the truth themselves, just go off of that? One from 2 months ago, one from 4 months ago. Video title does make it seem like you're defending. Yeah. When I said Joe Biden is a traitor, has sided with railroad companies to stop a worker strike from happening after the workers not agreed to the tentative agreement. That does probably, I haven't used strong enough language for them to understand, I think. You read out a message of mine where I said I'm in the hater communities to see what they're saying a while ago. And yeah, they've been getting wilder recently. Like, what the fuck are they saying now? They just they literally just, I guess they just have decided they'll make up things that are the exact opposite when the information is readily available. At least back in the day, they would try to clip some shit. At least back in the day, they would try to clip some shit that made it seem like I was saying the exact opposite of what I'm actually saying. Now, they just don't even look at that. From allies, supposedly allies and haters alike, too. Anyway, let's continue.
Of rhetoric. It's not a question of sound bites and all that stuff. Politics is about interests and power and who the government helps and who it hurts and what it does. So what do Republicans really care about? There's a record here. What do they do when they had power? Well, they had a trifecta. They had the White House and the House and Senate, and they tried to repeal Obamacare, which, by the way, would have absolutely screwed over white working class voters. Their repeal plan. Even Tucker Carlson, the fake populist, frozen food heir, called Trump out for it.
This bill has as one of its centerpieces a tax cut for investors that would primarily benefit people making over $250,000 a year. Already done pretty well in the past 10 years, as you know.
Yeah.
A Bloomberg analysis showed that counties that voted for you, middle class and working class counties, would do far less well under this bill than the counties that voted for Hillary, the more affluent counties.
I know.
It seems like maybe this isn't consistent with the message of the last election.
No, a lot of things aren't consistent.
Perfect. You ran on, we're going to screw over we're going to go after the globalists and Hillary Clinton, the WikiLeaks, and we're going to help you. But now you're passing a tax cut for rich people and screwing over the you in that? I don't get it. Yeah, you have just put your finger on the contradiction at the heart of it all. Now, Obamacare repeal failed. So Republicans then moved on to Plan B. Again, what do you want to do with power? And it was the biggest tax cut since Ronald Reagan. They slashed the corporate tax rate. That's what they want to do. That was about it. That was the extent of the governing agenda. That's the problem with the modern Republican Party. Who they are, who they claim to be are fundamentally at odds. Because it's true, their base increasingly is rural working class voters. Folks who have real material needs, like the people in East Palestine who can't get into their home that need to be met. But all they can offer them is culture war nonsense. The problem is your transportation secretary is gay. Because their corporate masters won't let them do anything to take on the big corporations or help workers or organize labor. And so what you get a lot of tweets. You got a page on the House Republican website advertising all their members' various podcasts. You can listen to all their podcasts. Look at that. They've all got podcasts. Good for them. On those podcasts, they rail against the liberal elites. But what you do not get is any real solution for actual real people.
Yeah, nobody wants to work anymore. Everyone wants to be a fucking influencer. You know what I mean? The only difference between like my rhetoric and Chris Hayes' rhetoric is that like he obviously doesn't have the same liberties that I do, editorially speaking, to just like straight up be like, yeah, Pete Buttigieg sucks. Like straight up. Pete Buttigieg